Hello, 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 and welcome to another edition of Critical Conversations. And yes, we are good. Sounds like we're good in terms of sound and everything. So, yes, live from Denver. It is Friday night. Hey, critics. You can see I am flying solo again this week. It's totally fine. Mel is just feeling sick. She actually started coming down with something this morning, and she toughed it out through the workday and was like, "Get me some rest." And so, so she's taking the night off, and we're going to be more than happy to give that to her. So, unfortunately, okay. Looking through the looking through the chat here. Yeah, play that funky music. Yes, Guror is asking, love the chat with Tony and chance of being a regular thing. Possibly, not necessarily regular, but more certainly having him around on the channel more often might be in the future for sure. I'm sure he and I could come up with some things to talk about. And it's always good, doing that everywhere. Yeah, everyone has been feeling sick. It is the end of January. We're rolling into February, or we're now in February. And so, winter, and it's been snowy and cold and kind of good. And so hardly a surprise that some illness has stricken the Shelton household here. I want to... We did not do Benson Cam last week, which was 1,000% my failure. So I have attended to that this week, and we should have an appearance here before too long. So there is that. And then otherwise, I wanted to talk a little bit about... a couple things before we get into any calls or anything. I've got a few things I'd like to discuss, tell you guys about. One of them, I think three things. So let's just start from the beginning. There was a documentary series, a 3-part documentary series that I had the privilege, I guess, of being notified about and was able to preview. And I think I can say this. I don't think I'm violating anything by saying this. I didn't sign anything. But I think previews have already dropped on this. It's called Stolen Youth. And it's a 3-part documentary about Larry Ray. And if any of you have been following the story of Larry Ray in the papers, he's not like world famous, but he is somebody who just went to jail for 60 years. And the guy is already 63 years old. Don't think he's coming out. And the documentary was about what he did to earn that 60-year sentence, which included sex and labor trafficking and coercion and all kinds of nonsense that he got up to with a small group of college students from Sarah Lawrence University. And I was given the opportunity to interview one of those survivors and the director of the film. And so you guys will see that probably next weekend, not this weekend, because I just already dropped my thing with Tony yesterday. So I'm not doing another podcast tomorrow, but next week you'll probably see that interview. And on February 9th is when the documentary itself drops on Hulu. I'm not getting paid anything for talking about this at all, by the way. There's nothing like that. It's just something I was involved in and got to learn about. And this this documentary, I'm laughing at Red Pill's comment about no Benson Cam. This documentary is pretty hard hitting. It's pretty good. It's short to the point. 3 hours is not a long, limited series to tell a story that spans 10 years. But here's the thing, and here's what I'll tell you about this that really hit home for me, moving into my sort of second thing I want to talk about here today, because I don't want to go on and on and on about this documentary. I want you guys to watch it and then see my interview on it, and you'll kind of get the picture of what it was all about. And Jeff Hawkins is around. Awesome. Oh, there he is. Yes. Awesome. Okay. Oh, let me get that. Somehow I got, let me try this. There we go. Okay, good. Didn't mean to have that comment stuck up there. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, these victims, from Sarah, Lawrence were, anyway, it was quite an interesting demographic. It's quite an interesting tale. And here's the thing about it is there was a lot of video footage of what this man did to these people. And that is rare. That's like with Nexium. You see some of it. You see Raniere passing, palling around with people on the basketball court and having these little group chats. And if you've watched The Vow or you've watched any Nexium documentaries, you're well familiar with Keith and his basketball shorts and headband and goofy glasses, and the way he would somehow entice people into his circle and eventually coerce them into having sex with him and all kinds of other awful things. Well, this guy, Larry Ray, wasn't so different, but he was operating on a small group of college students almost exclusively. He had a double life as well, which involved politics and criminality and stuff, which was fascinating to get into. But the thing about the video footage, this is what I want to get across to y'all as far as what happened with me this week is, man, it was affecting. It was hard to watch because it's not just video footage of Larry Ray being a great guy. It's video footage of his victims being victimized. And that's not, I don't mean that in some salacious, let's eat some popcorn and watch this. I mean, this is, if you've ever wondered, and this is for me why it's a big deal. If you guys wonder all the time and ask all the time about what it's like to be in a cult and what that, how could you, and what's that mindset and how does that work and how do people do this to people? The topic of our show tonight, brainwashing. How do they do this? Well, there's actual video of it. And the gaslighting it cannot be overstated. I was tweeting a little bit about this during the week about how, like narcissism, gaslighting is a term that is just so abused these days because the actual work of gaslighting is not just lying to somebody. It's not just telling some fibs and giving somebody a wrong impression or introverting a person a little bit because they think they got it wrong. Gaslighting is a whole nother level of coercion. It's getting into a person's head so hard, so effectively, so deeply that you are actually getting them to doubt, negate, totally invalidate, and then rewrite their own memories of what happened in the past. That is terrifying to see on camera. And that is what is shown as part of this documentary is the evidence was taken by the guy himself. He wanted all this footage taken. It was crazy. And it was incredibly coercive, incredibly abusive, and very hard to watch. And yet I am... Oh, yeah, I'd love to talk to Mark Vicente about that. I'll reach out to him about that. That's cool. We follow each other on Twitter. That's about how much I've spoken with Mark, but that might be a good thing to follow up on. So anyway, highly recommend this documentary, but boy, was it a little triggering, and I wanted to comment on that because I have said, and I certainly believe it's true that I have reached a place where I no longer have Scientology in my head the same way I used to, not even remotely the same. I don't think with the words or the terminology or the concepts. I don't immediately wonder because my wife got sick who's the SP or who she's PTS to. I don't wonder about clearing up my misunderstood words anymore. I use a dictionary like anybody else. I'm not obsessive about it. I don't even think twice about it anymore. But sometimes things can be triggering, and I had that happen, and boy, is it an experience, when that happens. I'm not trying to put myself out there as somebody special. I'm trying to say this happens, and when we should acknowledge it for what it is. You can come to a place of acceptance and recovery where things are, fine. But then sometimes, shit pops up. And this video footage of the gaslighting was particularly powerful for me because it got me thinking all about that topic and about my RPF experience and the truth rundown and things like that. John Atack and I are going to do a talk on Monday, and and we're going to discuss this topic more. But I thought I'd give you guys some thoughts and ideas just that I was having in my own mind this week based on watching this documentary. Again, it's called Stolen Youth, and it will be on Hulu February 9th. And I mentioned that there'd be some Benson Cam. One moment. Here's our guy. So I thought I'd give you guys some live Benson Cam this week to make up for last week. So he doesn't bark or anything like that, although he clearly does like the mic. Hey, buddy. Oh, hey. How's it going? Cool. So anyway, here's some Benson. All right. I never get enough of that dog. Okay. Where was I? Oh, yes. I think I was talking about brainwashing. So let's go ahead and segue into that, right? Boy, it really just got me into that mindset again about thinking very much about the truth rundown and about gaslighting and about how brainwashing works, because this documentary actually demonstrates and shows it in ways that I don't think a lot of other documentaries have particularly shown. And that's why I thought I would recommend it, even though the topic is rather grisly and hard to watch. One of the people involved, one of the victims, was a Harvard graduate of Harvard Medical School and Columbia University, and was a psychiatric resident who was in her last week of a residency. And she got entangled in this whole thing, snarled into it, and all of it. And if there is any better example or convincer for people out there that brainwashing or thought reform techniques or coercive control techniques are, that your intelligence and your education is no defense for you in this. I really just got to keep driving this point home, because people get so smug and so arrogant about this, and they really think that they are never gonna get fooled by some cult leader like an L. Ron Hubbard or a Larry Ray, and they think their intelligence and their education are gonna protect them. And I'm not coming at this from a position of smugness or conceit. I'm trying to point out it's just so wrong-headed to think that way. I want to cancel the whole idea. It's kind of where I'm coming from on this, is like, stop thinking that. It's not true. The more intelligent you are, the worse it can be for you in this regard. So, and I wanted to talk about the things that actually do get utilized, which will work on just about anybody, that will get you thinking and acting and feeling very different from how you act and feel and think right now. If you're wondering, what is brainwashing? Well, it's basically that in a destructive direction. In some direction that's really, really bad for you. Either, obviously psychologically, there's no such thing as good brainwashing. But there are grades of worse and worse and progressively worse brainwashing. And we're going to go into exactly why. He is asking me here, would you consider yourself unable to be brainwashable at this point because of your experiences in critical thinking related studies? And I will say no, absolutely I could be brainwashed. Again, absolutely. And I'm going to explain to you exactly why. Positive peer pressure is absolutely one of the points here that we're going to go over. But first, there's the matter of, there are the techniques of it. So let's talk about that first. I know I've got some calls in the queue here. I see that, and we will pick those up in a minute, but I do want to deliver this little monologue first, so y'all Be patient with me. Okay, so we have the techniques of brainwashing. And to answer the question of the topic of the show this week, obviously, yes, brainwashing is a real thing. And I'm sick and tired of people out there who, declare from their ivory towers that no such thing exists, and this is all some deluded fever dream or fantasy of ex-cult members. This is a very real thing, and it happens every day of the week all over the world. So it's worth knowing something about. Okay, so there are the techniques of brainwashing. And what are we talking about? Well, we have Lifton's model of the 8 points of milieu control and loaded language and, demand for purity and confession. All of those are techniques of brainwashing, but I wanted to go even more basic and easier to kind of understand rather than walking through Lifton. Let's talk real basics. Sleep deprivation. Food deprivation. Those are top of the list, because if you can get somebody in a state where they haven't slept well for a few days, that's bad. For a few weeks, that's really bad. For a few months, where you've got them layered down, fatigued, where they're just not sleeping, can't sleep, having, these, and you're doing things to make this happen. You can drive anybody. I will assert here, saying this from my, position of knowledge. I will say, I don't think there are too many people out there that you can't break with that alone. Just that. Just denying people sleep, fucking around with their sleep. Right? And if you have somebody in a controlled environment where you can do that, then we're talking, real concentration camp kind of activity or torture interrogation kind of activity that we see carried out by governments all over the world. But, and so that is where the factor of maybe controlling their environment's really important, but you can get this done. And this is the thing. Larry Ray did this on somebody from a long distance. You can do this on somebody over a distance. It's just wearing them down and feeding that person all kinds of delusional ideas and impressing upon them certain things that are really, really, really important just because you say they are. Like messing with their reality, slowly, shifting. And the lack of sleep that might exist in a situation like that which you could create, could all by itself get a person doubting their own reality, doubting their own perceptions. And once they're doubting their own perceptions, you got them. Because then you get to insert the answers that you want them to have and to think with. And the reality you want them to have is something they will accept because they're doubting their own reality. And that's what sleep deprivation all by itself can do. Then you start talking about food deprivation. Oh, let me see something here. Yes. Red Pill's asking a question here, which I'll throw up. Does brainwashing and or cults fill an emotional need that people have? Things like community, certainty, sex, companionship, etc. When it works, yes, that's exactly what it's doing. And that's where it ties in with emotional needs. That's emotional needs. I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to mention that earlier and I forgot. The emotion is sort of the hook that the whole brainwashing contraption sort of it attaches itself. That's how it attaches to you, is through those emotional needs. You have a need for community? Well, your community now depends on these people who are run by this guy. So all of those needs are now being met and filled through this community. And once you kind of go into that mode of, oh, yes, these are my people and these are the only people that matter, then it's an easy thing of, well, then those people out there who aren't us, don't matter, are bad people, are horrible. You can start feeding all those lines. Again, rewriting reality. So the community emotional need there would be a hook that could drive somebody into that or keep somebody involved in that. There's lots of ways of looking at that, but absolutely, again, security, attachment, achievement, goals, purpose, all of these emotional needs are tied into this. It's sort of the thing that gets you in the room in the first place and then keeps you there because now you feel like, oh, but this is a good thing for me. This is something that's helping me. This is something that I need in my life. And that's why you stick around long enough for the brainwashing techniques, the sleep, food, etc., that we're going to go over. They slowly are taking hold of you. It's not a 24-hour thing. When it's done, I say when it's done well, when it's done most effectively, where it's going to last longest in somebody, is when it's done slowly, gradually, the boiling frog in the water thing, right? In the boiling water. That's the best way to do it, because the person has no clue that it's being done to them, because it's such a gradual progression. And it's kind of interesting how fast even that can be made to happen. Within a year time, you can have somebody who's practically unrecognizable from the person they were a year ago. Completely different mindset, completely different religious and moral foundations. I mean, different dogma, different belief. You get people who get into, the conspiracy world. You see how fast that happens. Same thing, right? So, or very, very similar. Okay. So getting back to this, let's go to sleep deprivation, food deprivation. Okay. Once you've got the person like weakened, let's say, right? It's not an absolute guarantee that just reducing somebody's food or sleep or wearing them down over time is going to be enough. That emotional needs component has to be there too. Otherwise, they just know you're abusing them, and that doesn't make a lot of sense. So they have to feel that this whole thing is something that's good for them, that they need, that they want, that is somehow part of, that is fulfilling for them somehow. Again, that's the way to make it most powerful. Otherwise, it's going to take a lot more time. It's going to wear the person down to the point where they're not even thinking anymore, and then you're installing new ideas. But if they're still thinking and still involved and still in there, if you can emotionally get them into it, you're golden, right? Yes, exactly. As Fabian mentions here, I find that the more curious folks will dive in deep in an attempt to understand. That's right. Intelligence is part of the hook. Exactly. And that's why an obfuscated, bizarre, hard to understand dogma can be so, what's the word I'm looking for? Can be so, it's such a magnet for some people. They're just dying to figure it out. I was kind of like that in Scientology for a long time. I just kept reading and pouring through the lectures and the books, trying to make it make sense. And people will do that. And so this is one of the reasons why the whole double bind, confusing text, very generalized, says one thing here, says another thing here. That's all kind of on purpose. It's not an accident or bad, or not always at least, bad writing and bad thinking on the part of the cult leader. It's sometimes very purposeful that they make it all of this hodgepodge mess of things that are very hard to understand, because it keeps you sucked in trying to understand it. And that's also the best place to introduce all that loaded language we talk about, where you start giving people new words and new concepts for things, and they glom onto this thinking now they've got that special knowledge that nobody else has or could ever get. And that's, again, that feeding into that emotional needs component. Okay, so you're basically what you're trying to do with brainwashing, the simplicity of the function of it is weaken the person's natural sort of immunities or safeguards or critical thinking, knock all that down. However you need to go about doing it with the person, do that, right? Sleep, food, criticism, overbearing, appeals to authority, appeals to emotion. There's 1,000 ways to manipulate people so that they feel powerless, but feel like that's a good thing, and they want, to be in this position where they need this authority figure, authority leader, or whatever, thought leader in their life. Yeah, with a dressing of love bombing. That's right. You guys are totally keeping up on this. This is awesome. So, so what you're trying to do is you're trying to knock out, once they're weakened, once they're in this sort of weakened mental, psychological, even physical state, that's when you can start knocking out what we might call the fundamentals of their belief or their life view, their viewpoints, their what's important to them. What are the things that that actually? Oops, gotta get back to something here. There it is. What are the things that are important to them? What are their values? What are their morals? What do they think is true? What are their absolute rock bottom fundamental? This is true, and everything, and they align everything around to that. In Scientology, we used to call that your stable data, right? The information you have that isn't changing, that you believe and you hold true. Those are the things that need to be attacked. Those are the things that need to be knocked out of the way. And it's a gradual descent into that. First, more surface level philosophical ideas or moral quandaries or other kind of challenging exercises might be given or presented or talked about or discussed. Well, what about this? And what about that? Cult leader is just trying to find out, the predator is just trying to find out, where are you weakest? Where are you uncertain? Where are your trigger points? And then they find them and they start attacking through those, right? Oh, this is where this person has some sensitivity. This is what this person thinks is true or real. Well, let me throw some curves at them and get them doubting some of those things, questioning some of those things. Can I do that? And if you can, and if you're really dedicated to trying to do that to somebody, if that's kind of your thing, you can figure people out that way. And you start tearing down the things that make them who they are. You're sort of wiping out their stable data, to use that term, and replacing it with your own. And our brains are kind of built for this, if you think about it. Okay, and that's kind of how I wanted to talk about this a little bit tonight. Is those are the techniques of it, but there's also another factor. And that is, before I go into this other stuff, the techniques are what we talk about all the time. Lifton's 8 points, and all that. But I don't think a point that's emphasized enough is the milieu control. And it's the very first point of Lifton's 8 points, is the environmental control. Because that's really, really important to getting all the way into a person's head. And that's why isolation, that first component of coercive control, is so important. That's why you see cult leaders or cults always getting their own buildings, or being all together in a little house, or being together somewhere where they're isolated and alone from everybody else. It's that controlled environment. And that environment is inclusive, inclusive to only the people in it and exclusive of everybody else. Like, nobody else gets to be part of this. It's special, it's unique, it's different. It's your special place. And that environment, and it creates that peer pressure that somebody commented on earlier. And the peer pressure aspect of this must not be undervalued. I wanted to talk about all those techniques so I could say that. Is the techniques are important, and they'll get you to this place, but they won't keep you there if the environment is not reinforcing it. That's where I wanted to get to tonight with that in this monologue, is that is super, super, super important. And it's something people don't think about a lot, because they think about brainwashing as a one-on-one activity, or something a person walks around in this state of, oh, I've been brainwashed now. Like there's an off-on switch or something, and it's not like that. The environment is what reinforces and solidifies the new reality the person has been indoctrinated into, and keeps it real. And it has to keep doing that for the brainwashing to stick, to hold, to continue. Because if you take a person and you put them in a Sea Org environment, and you get them all, yes sir, no sir, how high sir, and everybody's on the same page and reporting to muster every day and saying yes sir and how high sir and what's the quota for today sir, and all that. You get all this, everybody's marching in lockstep. But then you remove that person from that environment, which is fortunately kind of what happened to me by happenstance and accident in the last few years of my time in the Sea Org, where I got to get out of that environment, get in a car by myself, driving around in the Western United States for a while, for a few months. And that's where it starts dissipating, and it starts that differing reality, that installed reality starts falling apart because your brain and your body and your life are experiencing a whole different reality, and it's not that reinforced environment keeping it there. And to the degree you can totally remove the person from that situation is, has something to do with the speed with which they will undo or, kind of unindoctrinate themselves. Right? Which is really just a matter of re-indoctrinating themselves again into this more non-destructive environment. And that can take some damn time. Man, can that take time and real dedicated effort, because people are different. And some people will hold on to this stuff a lot longer than other people. Some people couldn't get away from it fast enough. They let it go. They're open to new ideas. They're open to suggestions. They're open to learning new stuff, and they just go for it. And that was kind of where I was at when I got out of Scientology. But some people are not. A lot of people are not. And they don't even want to talk about it. They don't want to deal with it. And so it stays. It lingers. Right? They don't get therapy for it. They don't read about it. They don't educate themselves on it. And all those action patterns that were sort of installed through the indoctrination stick. And this is why you see people sometimes come out of cults and still act like they're in the cult. Happens all the time. I've done it. Everybody's done it. It's not a big deal, and it's not some big insult. It's just, it is what it is. It's deacclimating from that culty environment into a new one. And if you don't put some time and attention and effort into that, then you can count on the fact that you're probably still going to think and talk and act like a cult member. I sure did for a while after I got out of Scientology. And those action patterns that I talk about here, those are, that's deep brain habit stuff. And that's the kind of stuff that it takes a long time to undo. And to the degree you can give it a dedicated effort and really work on it, is the degree that, it'll respond to therapy and education and help. And yet at the same time, some people come out of these situations and those emotional needs kick in again. And it's like, no, this dogma, this belief set, these ideas, they still do it for me, even if the structure or the organization or the cult leader was bad and abused them. The ideas still comfort me or satisfy me, or these certain practices still comfort me and aid me and give me, these things. And they'll hold on to it, right? And we see this with independent Scientologists. We see this with, people who go out of one cult, but maybe go and join something really close or similar to it, that kind of thing. So, all right. So I'm just going to kind of look at some of the comments here, see where we're at, since I've finished most of my points, and I'm going to go into the calls in a second. Yeah, see, boot camp is a very interesting analogy or comparison to this in a lot of ways, because it's a understood and agreed upon process of going through all of this. Because really what I'm talking about with this whole brainwashing is this sort of this ultra conditioning kind of thing. And it's going to look and sound similar to lesser grade versions of it, like a boot camp. That's a tough thing. But boot camp is a set thing. It's, 9 weeks or something, and it's a known program. You have fully informed consent going into it. You know exactly what you're going to be doing and exactly how you're going to be doing it and exactly why you're doing it. There's no question about that. And if there is, it's basically because you didn't do your due diligence, not because they weren't telling you or weren't open and transparent about what this process is going to be. That matters a lot to everything I'm talking about here, because the underlying assumption here is that part of this thing with brainwashing is that you don't know what's being done to you. This isn't a voluntary process. This isn't something you do and it's happening to you as it's happening. That's the whole point, is you don't know. Boot camp's a whole different thing, right? Police academy, tough things, special forces training, etc. These are tough, rigorous programs. Even going off and being a Catholic monk is tough, but I wouldn't call those things brainwashing. because they don't line up the same way as all the other things I was just talking about, a little bit different. Okay. So, yeah. And nobody said, I'm sure as Red Pill here is commenting, right? Nobody said any of that stuff is fun. And it is compliance making. I mean, no doubt about it. It's about compliance. And it's about even unthinking compliance in some circumstances. But I think the modern military, at least in the Western countries, doesn't want unthinking subservience. I think they want people thinking about the orders they're executing. I don't know. At least that's what I've heard. But moving on, now that I've gotten a chance to talk about all of that and monologue like mad, let me make sure. Yep, that's all the stuff I really wanted to get into today on this. So let's go ahead and start taking some calls. Put my headphones on so I can hear them. All right, I believe this is Henny.
Yes. Hi, Chris. Good evening.
Hi, Henny. Welcome to the show. Great talking to you.
Yeah, great seeing you. I hope Mel feels better.
Yes.
You really, wow, you really talked it to us tonight. I got to tell you.
Had a lot on my mind.
That was a lot of information, and it was hard hitting, and it was to the point and really wonderful. I'm going to try to bring in, my little piece of it.
Yeah, what you got?
Well, as far as brainwashing goes, you brought up the food and the deprivation,
Yep.
the sleep deprivation, the gaslighting. And that gaslighting is also extremely unbelievable.
Yeah.
Because it really is not it's not just a lie, but it is a total deception of another person's reality. And
Correct.
that's what makes this a cult, okay? Or a brainwashing, the beginning to brainwash.
You got
okay?
it. You got it.
I believe that everybody is susceptible to brainwashing, and it can happen, like you said, with just one thing, it could be, it goes far beyond that because it's love bombing and there's,
all the stuff. Yeah.
Think of it as the Stockholm syndrome.
Mm.
Okay. And that's when, the love bombing stage, the trust and dependency, the criticisms, then the gaslighting, and it goes on and on,
That's right.
But basically, it really does. But I want to say something that I got from what you said.
Yeah, what you got?
Because as you were telling of all the different brainwashing techniques that are used, I was coming up with ideas of people, all of us. That's why I use the word people. Can be easily brainwashed because we want to know. We want to know whatever it is. We want to know whether it's
Sure.
We want to know.
Yep.
So that's one thing. We also want, and I started to write family and familiarity, but I'd like to merge the roles. Okay.
Sure.
Because I believe that is something that people want also desperately. I think they want camaraderie and that us, people, we want to believe that we're right.
Yes, we have to believe that. Yeah, absolutely.
So if we can find those things, somebody will be selling it. What is that? Where there's an old saying, I wish Corinne knows it. Where there's a want, there's a need, or where there's a need, there's a want. That's it.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay?
Sure.
And it's sad. But I believe if we have an education on what is out there and the manipulation of people, and we have a core value of ourselves, that we believe in ourselves and won't allow that. You know what I mean? To intrude in our core. then, and I'm not saying that's easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Believe me.
Exactly.
It's
You
not
are
an easy
describing
thing to
what we
do.
need to do, but yeah, it is very hard to do in the face of certain people who have, kind of certain powers over us sometimes. It's quite wild.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. It's and that's the things that came to me.
All right.
And I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Larry Ray
Yep.
documentary. I won't be able to watch that. But you're doing a follow-up, you said, on it.
I am. Yeah, there will be a podcast next weekend where I'm interviewing one of the survivors and the director of the doc.
Oh, okay. That's next weekend?
Yeah, I plan on dropping it next Saturday. Yeah, that's my plan.
Okay, great. Well, I thank you, and I hope that everybody is thinking critically, because
exactly,
coercive abusers try to take our critical thinking from us.
That's right. It's
they
first
really
target.
do.
That's right.
So, all right.
Thanks,
Good
Eddie.
work, Chris, always good work. Good night.
Bye-bye. All right, let's go to our next call here. Just seeing, yes, when in questioning the party line, forget it when now changed to another form of substance. Yeah, very much so. That's very true. Shame and guilt are absolutely part of that. Very, very powerful social motivators. Yeah, I'm gonna post that one up there, Xenu, because that's actually a very true statement. Most people don't really want the truth. They just want constant reassurance that what they believe is the truth. And that sounds cynical as hell and almost like, misunderstood, almost people hating, but it's really not. It's just sort of a statement of our vulnerability and fragility, because that's the truth, right? Some of us especially, our egos are incredibly fragile. But all of us have, this weakness, in this need to be right, to be certain, to be sure that what we're thinking and doing in our community is right and true and is what the community thinks. Because believe me, if you're the odd man out and everybody's got spears and and even if you do have a spear, you're screwed, right? Because they can just kill you and then you're done, because you're not agreeing with everything that's going on with everybody else in the group. And that's old motivation, right? For us. I mean, in terms of explaining the social dynamic there, it's very, very, very powerful stuff. It's not something you just logic your way through. It's something you've got to understand is happening to you at an emotional level. Because if you don't get that, then you won't understand the powerful forces that are driving you, to compelling you. That's the word I was looking for earlier, compelling a person to do things. If they don't have that emotional intelligence, it won't even register why they're doing what they're doing, much less that maybe somebody else is the one pulling the strings. Important stuff. Okay, so let's take another call. This is, I believe, Jan. Hello?
Dan,
hi. Sorry, hi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm called in a couple times before. This isn't what I was actually originally calling about, but you were talking about milieu control, and there's actually a well-known passage in the 10th chapter of the letter to the Hebrews in the New Testament, and a lot of more fundamentalist Christian groups will harp on this. And the purpose of the chapter is to warn against forsaking the assembly. Basically, the idea of this chapter is that if you don't go to church enough, you're going to fall away. And I mean, it's a pretty obvious.
You get it. You getting it.
For milieu control.
That's right. It's reinforcing the message. Right? Because here's my thinking on it. Let me know what you think of this. But I think it has to do with the fact that our brains are intrigued by novelty, by new things, and it's constantly looking for new experiences. But the steady Eddie, repetition of no, this is the one and only way, and there isn't any other way, and it must be this way. you'd have to keep yourself locked into that kind of view to maintain it. Otherwise, you're going to, get exposed to all these other ideas and new things to think about and stuff. And that looks like you had a little bit too much to think, kind of thought policing sort of thing. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think that kind of milieu control is very telling because it says something about how convincing or not so convincing a worldview actually is. Because I don't need to hypnotically reinforce the idea that 1 + 1 = 2. It's just obvious. But the idea that Earth is 6,000 years old, the fact that requires so much inculcation is pretty telling, I think.
I agree. I think so too. It needs constant refreshment.
Yeah, what I was originally calling about is have you ever encountered the phenomenon of someone almost brainwashing them, like a disciple brainwashing himself in spite of this kind of activity being discouraged by a teacher? Like, I've witnessed this I study yoga a lot, and up until the middle and late 19th century, yoga was a very intense one-on-one kind of esoteric, private, and in some ways kind of a pretty authoritarian relationship between a guru and a disciple. And this, in some ways, I mean, you might have known about this, but there's a whole Wikipedia page dedicated to abuse scandals, sexual and otherwise, by yoga teachers in the West. So some of them came over to India and abused their position of authority. I mean, I'd love to see you do a podcast episode just on that subject. It was, I think that'd be really interesting. But what I've encountered is that there are some yoga students who they'll project this mystique onto a teacher, even though the teacher actively discourages it, and is often is disturbed by it, and they will. Some of the more, I guess, suggestible students will interpret that discouragement as, oh, it's just a crazy wisdom kind of thing where he's hiding his true self from us, and they almost brainwash themselves. I guess maybe they're looking for a stable datum and insist that this teacher has to be it, even if he doesn't even want to be a cult leader. It would be like if some of your listeners saw you as the ultimate enemy of all cults, and they decided to make you a holy guru, omniscient, anti-cult leader.
Exactly.
Even though you
no, that's absolutely not. Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. I think you have two possible scenarios there. One where you have an earlier experience this person has had where they have been in a more culty, authoritarian type environment and were sort of educated into this is your role as the student, is you're supposed to be subservient and, an open sponge and all this kind of attitude about the leader or something. That either could have been a point of earlier indoctrination. I'd say probably most of the time it's going to be something like that, or perhaps also some earlier trauma, that might create that kind of, sort of disorganized attachment that the person feels they need to have with authority figures.
What that does make sense. What would you think of somebody who seems to be really gung-ho about that idea that like a yoga teacher is like a higher being, and they really like this idea that we plebes are just like too dumb and spiritually undeveloped to understand what they're really, and that we just have to unconditionally surrender to this person. I mean, I guess you kind of just answered it in a sense, but some people seem to be like they really like this idea. That it almost seems to be, in some cases, I mean, I guess maybe this would be a subset of this phenomenon where it almost seems like a kink of their personality. I mean, do you think have you thought about, are there cases where you can differentiate between some people it's more situational. They're not naturally prone to that. They just sort of been conditioned or traumatized, and then other people just seem to really like it, like this idea of.
Well, some people have different emotional needs, right? So,
right.
And some of those needs are kind of weird. I mean, I don't mean to make light of it, but I mean, in other words, there are people who are a little bit more needy than other people, right? There are people who seem more naturally independently minded than people. There are other people who seem very community centric or community oriented. And we can look to training for this or indoctrination or even young life experiences. But there's also just the fact that people are different and they bring different things to the table. I think that kind of desperate sort of subservience that you're describing, the kind of I need to be in this place of, I'm the learner and he's the master and it's going to be so awesome, is a little bit of a, I don't know, I could go a couple different directions with that. So I don't want to be too broad or draw stereotypes here, but I'm going to say that I'm going to stick with my assertion that there's probably going to be some young life, early life stuff there in terms of their ability to form boundaries and relationships in a healthy way.
Have you heard of any kind of like work on a typology done of I guess different types of, I guess you could say cult members, or like a typology of different kinds of people in that situation? Like it's more of a rigorously articulated. Well, here are the kinds of people we found. Is there, if there's any kind of scholarship on that?
Yeah, no, I don't think that there is. Certainly nothing I've seen. Such work could be used in a very blame the victim kind of way, which I think is one reason why maybe some scholars might want to not go in that direction. Others, and the other questions regarding it are the research around something like that would be so subjective. It would be very hard to draw up standard, markers and tests that would, clearly, objectively measure and differentiate these things you're discussing. They're very, very subjective.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Well, thanks for taking my call. It was an awesome time talking to you again, and I look forward to your next podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Thanks for calling in. All right. And I think this is Gail. Hello. Hello. All right. We are moving on. Okay. Those are the calls in my queue right now. Let me see what we got here. Oh, Henny's saying something. Shit, I wanted to say, Chris, life's a healing process. The design to continuum after experiencing abuse. We must learn to accept ourselves with compassion when rumination or triggers appear. Yes. Exactly. Sometimes those triggers are hard, man. I guess I wanted to, since I've got some time on my hands here right now and we have a little bit of time, let me share just a little bit more of this with you that I was going to say earlier, but I kind of got off on a tangent. Oh yeah, I will get to that, Xenu. I feel like I'm admitting something here. Sometimes I have depressive days, and sometimes those days really, really suck. And earlier today was one of those days. Today was not a great day, and I think part of it was the triggering influence of the documentary and the sort of deep thinking that goes on with that, and also I think I just got a little bit too much of the world in my face the last couple of days, and needed to take a little distance break from some of that. Now, by that I mean social media, because of course Twitter and Reddit and Facebook tend to be the cesspools of the internet. And, So, yeah. So I have found my wife and my dog to be amazing emotional support creatures in my direction on that. But I guess I wanted to sort of say that out loud because I don't talk about that a lot. But it happens, that happens. And it's never fun when it does. But I was really happy to be able to, if you could sort of look at the curve of my day, I was happy that it sort of, started going up again as I started thinking about doing the show today and putting the show together and then doing it here today with you guys. This is, just talking to you guys, having this experience. I mean, I just want you all to know it's not, it's a two-way thing. I really enjoy the hell out of doing this and sharing this stuff with you guys. And the fact that you're around and care and are interested is amazing to me some days. Just absolutely amazing. So thank you very much for your viewership. And I wanted to say all that. Okay, so let's go ahead and start wrapping up the show. If I missed anything super, super vital, now would be the time to throw it into, my needle's floating, into the chat. Xion had a question earlier I did want to bring up. Oh, thank you, Corrine. Thank you very much for that. I'm very happy to hear that. Xion, how does brainwashing compare with convincing someone, being a good salesman, commercials on TV, hypnosis? Okay, brainwashing doesn't compare with any of those things until you get to the hypnosis part, because all of those things are things that are being done to you and you are fully aware of and can walk away from it anytime you want. Hypnosis, not so much, right? That's where we start getting a little coercive. That's where we start getting underhanded. And I know I'm well aware that there are underhanded sales techniques, and to that degree that you're using deception or lies is the degree that you're moving down the spectrum of indoctrination toward toward indoctrination and hypnotism and brainwashing and undue influence. So once you start down that path, it's a spectrum thing and you're moving down. So yeah, there are vague shades of this in salesmanship and stuff, but brainwashing's a whole nother level. It's kind of like the difference between lying and gaslighting. They're two really different animals. I mean, lying is telling somebody a deceptive fact or something that's not true. And that's bad, and that can mess with a person's thinking and can cause all kinds of problems. There's nothing good about lies. But gaslighting is a whole nother level. Well, it's the same thing with sales and then brainwashing, because here we're talking about the sleep and food deprivation. These are not optional things. I included them in there and talked at length about them because they are vital components to this thing we call brainwashing. And if you're talking about brainwashing, as far as I'm concerned, you're talking about this level of depravity in dealing with people. You're talking about purposeful working them over, weakening them, tearing them down, deconstructing, destroying their personality, and putting your own in place. And that is crazy making. And it's every time it's done on purpose. This is not a passive accidental activity. So that's what I wanted to say on that. Okay, cool. Yeah, exactly. They just, and you don't know it's happening when it's happening. And one of the reasons why is because your defenses are lowered. Sleep and food, these are vital for us. I hope the reverse message of this is also coming through, that it's really important to get good sleep and get good food and keep your head about you. Right? Those are the three things that will keep you out of a bad culty situation more than practically any other advice I could give you. And I wish I had put it that way in earlier shows on this, because that's, because it even comes down to that level of basic stuff. Okay. So yeah, let's go ahead and wrap up now. We've got our critical thinking cards. Let me draw one at random. A Dunning-Kruger effect. Your bias. This is a cognitive bias. Dunning-Kruger. The more you know, the less confident you're likely to be. Because experts know just how much they don't know, they tend to underestimate their ability. But it's easy to be overconfident when you have only a simple idea of how things are. Be skeptical of very confident opinions that lack expert understanding. All right, so there we go. All right. Great, guys. I'm really happy that that Red Pill murdered his toilet earlier and that you guys got something out of this and on top of all of that. So, yes. All right. Oh, yes. In terms of Sunday, I'm planning on a pre-recorded. Circumstances led me to do live last week, I think, but I'm planning on pre-recorded for the Q&A show on Sunday. And I don't have any midweek stuff planned for next week right now, but if that changes, I will let you guys know. Otherwise, I will see you next Friday. All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up, guys. Thank you very much. And by the way, I do consulting. I'm here for you guys professionally if you need that. It's not therapy, but it is consulting. And you can reach out to me at askchrisshelton@gmail.com, and I will work that out with you. And of course, this channel is entirely fan-funded by you guys. So it would be remiss of me to not mention that and let you know, Patreon, PayPal, Venmo, whatever. Show me some love. It's what keeps the channel going. All right, guys. See you next week. Oh, yeah, and my book. All right. Bye-bye. Let's see here.